All right. So thank y'all for logging on for this. Here's someone else joining. I've enabled the waiting room because one thing, if you've done online worship, I know some people are using Zoom for that. Hopefully no one in our diocese has experienced Zoom bombing. But I do know of other colleagues who have, where people just find a public Zoom link or however they get access, they show up, and sometimes they're not fully clothed, or sometimes their picture is a swastika or whatever, So I've enabled a waiting room. So that's why when you log on here, you had to wait for a minute for me to pay attention and see that someone was waiting and then let you in. And Debbie and I talked about that just the other day. They're thinking about doing a Zoom coffee hour at St. Christopher's. And that's my one real recommendation, is to do the waiting rooms to help stave that off. So I open up the floor. Yeah, Suze.
Just to add to that, you can enable a chime for whenever somebody enters the waiting room, so that you don't have to look up and see. It'll
yeah,
bing.
I knew. And I had turned off the chime for when people enter, because I don't need to know when people join, but the waiting room one would be helpful. So I will look into that. Thank you.
Well, it's the same chime. It'll chime twice. It'll chime when they enter the waiting room and when they come in. But that way, if you've got a lot of people and you're trying to manage a big meeting, it can kind of facilitate that.
Yeah, that's helpful. So yeah, I open up. What's working for folks? Or what questions do you have about, worship at this time, about, pastorally, what are we doing with worship? Technologically, what are we doing? What ideas have you had? What successes have you had? Yeah, Suze.
We did something this past week. We're live streaming for the most part. And, since we can only have 3 people, it kind of limits us a little bit as to what we can incorporate. But what we did this past week was we created a video that I just put together on iMovie of some old Facebook pictures, and, just put some music behind it. It was just faces, basically familiar faces, and some pictures of our space. And people really liked that. And so what we're doing this month is we're having selfie Sundays, and we have themes for each of those Sundays. And so we just run that before the service as people are joining our live stream. That's what they see is this video. And so this coming Sunday is just going to be selfie Sunday. It can be, one that you do for this particular Sunday, or it could be a favorite from days gone by. The next Sunday is Mother's Day. So we're encouraging people to send a picture of either of their mother or of themselves with their mother. And then the week after that is Senior Sunday. And we're going to be honoring our graduating seniors, high school seniors. And so we're asking people to send their senior high school picture. And then the week after that is, we're asking them to do something creative, make a poster or something to convey a message of peace, joy, or love. And then on Pentecost, we're asking them to send in, to wear red. So that's just something that we're going to try again and see how the interest runs for that.
That's awesome. And yeah, so that's it's a conversation I had with Furman at St. Peter's about the Facebook Live or whatever you do in live streaming. I know y'all, you and your husband's Will, right? Is that his name? So, yeah, he's got some expertise in this area. And so y'all are doing more than just a phone streaming to Facebook, right? In order to have that video, you're using additional software. Do you know what that?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of different cameras set up. We can't really use those during the service because he's also my lector. So the 3 people who are in the room are Will and our organist and myself.
Okay.
And so Will and I sing. Fortunately, he's a good singer. He's better than I am. and Cynthia sings along too. But basically, we've been using a program called Minicam, which is okay. Will is actually learning to use OBS.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
OBS is, yeah.
He said that's the standard.
Yeah.
But anyway, so when we have the capability to have at least one or two more people in the room, we can do a whole lot more with multiple cameras. But for right now, we've just got a stationary camera, and Will just sort of runs the video as we're going live. And then we go back to the live stream with when Cynthia is playing her prelude, and we gather and just sort of walk in together, he and I do, when we go live.
Okay. The conversation I had with St. Peter's was about how to incorporate more than just the 3 people. And so the conversation that he and I had was about going away from live streaming, like absolutely live, where, he's there at St. Peter's at 10 o'clock, and pre-recording. There's some congregations that are moving to that. That allows you, it's simpler than to use an editing software to add an opening video, or to have someone read the Old Testament reading from their house and send you the video, or to have prayers of the people. You splice all that together, and then what some congregations are doing in this diocese and church-wide is then posting that as a, quote, premiere. When you premiere something, it functions just like a live video. The only difference is there's not actually someone live at that same time. Trinity Cathedral has moved to that. Theirs was largely an internet bandwidth issue. They were having problems with their live feed because just the internet. And other churches have reported that. Sunday morning, as you can well imagine, Facebook is struggling to keep up. YouTube is all these platforms are struggling to keep up with the increased usage. And so some churches have moved to premiering. And so they'll record the worship service, ahead of time. I don't know when Trinity records, but during the week, and then they post it to show up then. That's one way that folks are working to help any technical problems that are coming up with no Wi-Fi in the sanctuary or whatever, but also looking at ways to incorporate more people in the liturgy is by recording someone separately. You can splice in that video, and you can have more faces. Todd, you were going to say something.
First off, thank you for having me here today. And the second is thanks for letting me know about that, because this past week, the way Church of the Cross has been doing is I've become by what I would call battlefield promotion, to become basically the head liturgist. And I experienced that last week. Was I got 3/4 of my cast done, and then it cut off the very end, so I had to go back and re-record the last part. And when you do it on your own, no liturgy, me on my own, gets pretty rough.
Yeah, and I mean, all the companies, there's some companies that just specialize in online church, and they have platforms and all these. Even those are struggling on Sundays. And so a lot of the recommendations have been, if you're experiencing that, to pre-record and then post. Janie, you had your hand up earlier. You're muted. Yeah, now.
Okay, there we go. I was pushing it, it wasn't doing it. Am I muted? Okay, good. So we started with the pre-recording and then uploading it and premiering, and that gave people a glance at the church. We cannot live stream in the church. It's old enough and the walls are thick enough. There's just no way to do it. So we, this week, moved to Zoom, and it worked brilliantly. I had, one person on technology, so I didn't have to think about it. Our brand new music director Zoomed in from Charlotte. And so, and people loved it. And we had this genius moment that was very short in morning prayer when we asked for intercessions and thanksgivings. We unmuted everyone. I said, this is going to be a cacophony, but it is in church anyway when we do this. So we'll just do this for a little bit. And it was wonderful to hear the voices and for them to hear each other. And so until we can have more people in church and pre-record and go back to that, this is a really great way for people to see each other. And what was surprising to me was the spiritual energy felt like church. And it's the first thing we've done in this time that was able to bring that, at least for me to feel it. So
when you did that, were you at home?
I was at home.
Yeah.
Dogs and all. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, my preaching, I think, would improve a lot if people were able to see my dogs in the midst of it.
It does help. They usually bark or growl or moan or do something. It's sort of like, what are they going to do today? And it was just very real and what was really great was I got technologically distracted about something. I don't remember what. And I ran right over the offertory where Chip was going to play something. And just to be able to say, well, Chip, I ran right over you, and then say the offertory sentence and have him go play, it just felt really real. It felt real time. And we've heard more about that than anything we've pre-recorded. So they're missing the church, but we can't do that without using people's data, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. A couple things on that. There's a Facebook group that's been really helpful. It's called Zoom Church.
Okay.
You can look up that. Bruce Reyes Chow is the moderator of that, where it's people sharing their war stories about, this worked or this didn't, just sharing ideas.
One good one.
And so that's become the key resource hub for using Zoom as worship that I found.
Thank you.
Another thing with that. And so, if you have a paid Zoom account, you have unlimited time. You're still capped to 100 people, which for some congregations is fine. But you can also live stream your Zoom to Facebook or YouTube.
That's what we did.
Okay. Yeah. So that helps broaden for places that are worried about reaching the cap. But even for the free Zoom, if you're just doing a morning prayer or something that's less than 40 minutes, you can get online and do that for free. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Todd, yeah.
Since I'm brand new to this whole new Zoom and all that, does it cost money to have more than one person? Or how many people can you have up that's free?
So for free, it's 100 people. So the max for the free or the simple paid plan, which is $15 a month or something, that's 100 people on a call. So that would be, 5 pages of 20 people on a page like you're seeing right now. You can pay for more than 100 people. I don't know how expensive that gets. There's another paid option for webinars, which allows a little bit more control. That would be where all of your pictures go away and just I, as the presenter, would be the picture that you would see, and you can share that. I do know some churches have used that just to not have the Brady Bunch, but other churches love that part. And so some of that just comes down to what works best in your situation. That the webinar costs additional money. I think it's $30 a month. I don't know. You can look that up.
Okay, because that's how I've been learning a lot about liturgical resources this past month by going to the CEEP program and from Virginia Theological Seminary.
Yeah, Virginia Seminary has some resources. Sarah Stonecipher Boylan, you can find her videos at VTS's Lifelong Learning. She's done a lot of tutorials on Zoom. The SEEP Network has done some stuff as well, CEEP.
Yeah, that's who it is, SEEP Network.
Yeah, so they're doing some good stuff. Janie has a question. We'd be over 100 if everyone attended. Yeah. And when you add the live streaming to Facebook, part of that's good just on Facebook for more people to like and share, whatever. But then it also archives it. The other thing you can do to help facilitate people's worship later in the day or during the week is like what I'm doing, record. And so we could be having our, morning prayer service here, the 11 of us, and then I record it and then post it. And so the 3 people who want to come later today could participate that way as well. So the limits with the free version is a max of 40 minutes, which would be enough for a simple morning prayer service, most likely, and then 100 people. The lower tiered paid version removes the time limit, but you still have the 100-person limit. The other thing Zoom offers is call-in options for people that don't have internet or don't have devices that can participate in a webinar or a Zoom call. They can call in. The numbers aren't toll-free, but on cell phones, that's less of an issue. So it offers the call-in option as well. I believe that's available on the free tier, but don't quote me on that. What else? Other questions, ideas, things that are working, things that aren't? Alice, I'd love to hear an update on y'all's conference call worship. I just love that idea.
Hey, everybody. It's good to be with you. You know, what started out in the beginning, I thought, I'm a dinosaur when it comes to technology. You know, how am I supposed to manage all of this? And I'm so grateful that I listened early to Professor Farwell, is it from Virginia, Farwell? And he said, you know, if you're not a parish that is sitting on go with technology, now is not the time to try live streaming. And I thought, thank you, Jesus, I don't have to do this. And about that same time, my senior warden, Henry, offered his work conference call number. And I thought, you know, everybody knows how to dial a phone number. And I have found that's not true. Some of the folks who struggle with mental issues have difficulty even calling in, that even that is confusing. But I wanted to do something that everybody could participate in. And I had the assumption in the beginning that we would do this for a while on the conference call and then move towards something more sophisticated. And I don't want to say my folks rebelled against Zoom, but something close to that. And I think in part that's because they were able right off the bat to hear one another's voices, and I learned very quickly that, you know, to kind of ride herd on everybody, I had to take roll at the beginning, and so that's what we do, Margaret and I. And let me just say to everybody how wonderful it is to have Margaret as a deacon. She came on Ash Wednesday, right as this was all unfolding, and there she is. Thank you, Margaret, for being my partner. We're having an amazing time, really. We have prayer twice a day, every day. It's not just on Sunday morning. And we're doing anti-communion on Sunday morning. And then every night we have Compline, and Monday through Saturday we have morning prayer. And it has just been amazing how connected people feel. And I've kind of taken a poll here and there. Do y'all want to move towards Zoom? And they don't really want to. We are doing a Zoom coffee hour, and I'm doing a couple of different formation opportunities. We're doing a book on prayer and doing Lectio Divina on Zoom. And this week we'll start a foyer group on Zoom. So we are using that platform, but as far as Sunday worship goes, you know, we've made the decision to just stick with what is working. Our average Sunday attendance for 2019 was 48, and we had 58 people on Easter Sunday on a phone call, which just blew me away that many people showed up. And we're having you know, around 35 or so on a Sunday, which is darn good for us. So, and I'm finding, you know, as many ways as possible to include as many people. So we have, now there's a severe limitation of sound quality on the phone. So we've discovered that, as far as singing goes, one or two voices, if those voices are in the same room using the same device, is all we can do, with no accompaniment. But even that is working okay. We're using simple Taizé chants for the Gloria and the sequence, which I had been wanting to sneak in ever since I arrived. So finally got a good excuse to use Taizé chants. But we have a person sing an opening hymn, just a couple verses, and a closing hymn, someone else doing the chants. And we have a reader. We have, of course, Margaret is leading prayers of the people. And so we have one person who is the responder now to represent the congregation in responding. We do open it up for prayers when we do morning prayer in Compline, but not on Sunday morning. I haven't opened that up. Anyway, I'm rambling. I feel I'll stop talking, but I thank God that it's working as well as it is, and really drawing our community, those who are choosing to participate, drawing our community closer together. So thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Margaret, you have anything to add?
No, except that it's really amazing. Like you said, was only there 3 weeks before we started this, so I didn't know the people personally, but I've really gotten to know their stories, because after morning prayer in Compline, we always have a little chat time, and for open prayer requests, and just for how you're doing. And it's been a real lifeline for some of the people in the parish who aren't doing well, and they can call in and know that there's somebody there on the end of the call. And that's been amazing.
Thank you.
I would
Todd.
Ask, because thanks to the inspiration of last week's webinar with Dr. Lisa Kimball and Frank Farwell, I'm trying to move to a anti-communion myself, but I would like a more clear definition of what that is, because from what I've been searching for on the internet, the answer hasn't been satisfying. And I want to try to explain to them what I'm trying to do in reality is I'm trying to move us back to more of what they're more familiar with on Sundays, because when we do eventually re-enter Sunday, it'll be almost a seamless transition. And I just don't want people to get confused and
Yeah, it's an older term. It is, at least my understanding of it, is that it's the liturgy of the word. It's the part of the Sunday morning Eucharist up to the peace, and then going in, essentially, you would still include the creed and those parts after the peace that aren't the Eucharistic celebration, and then end with the dismissal. So it's the same structure Sunday morning, basically pulling out the communion piece. And so people are more familiar with the prayers. People are more familiar with the rhythm.
And that's why I would keep the general Thanksgiving instead of communion, and then keep it kind of a sort of a anti-communion hybrid of morning prayer and end it that way. And it gets me out of there a little bit within 30 minutes.
Yeah, we have some congregations that are still doing Eucharist, and for those there, they'll have the elements there, and they offer spiritual communion, which there's a prayer available for that. Some congregations are still doing that. Some have moved completely to morning prayer. St. Peter's Greenville is doing the liturgy of the word, the anti-communion. I know some others are. Suze, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer the thought that we may not go immediately into a situation where, even as we're gathering, it is prudent to move directly to Holy Eucharist. We are planning that when we are able to gather together, that we will continue to do morning prayer. We're doing morning prayer exclusively on Sunday mornings right now. And we're preparing our folks for that idea that even when we can gather, it may not be the wisest move to go directly to Holy Communion. So I just wanted to offer that.
Yeah, and my thoughts on that is the Liturgy Task Force will provide recommendations and some parameters for things that are permissible. But then that takes me back to Paul, right? Paul says all these are permissible, but not everything's beneficial. And so you don't have to do everything. And I'm thinking there particularly around high touch things that might not, the Eucharist, the peace, the offering plate. These things are probably being considered by that task force of, even when we're in person, it's not going to be large groups for a while, and it's probably not going to involve the same level of intimacy and touch. And so those are things that when that task force comes out with the guidance, that then clergy and lay leaders are going to have to wrestle with is so this is what we could do, but what should our community do? And that's going to look different place by place. Alice, yeah.
Yeah, the Liturgy Task Force, will they have recommendations on, will it be broader than just the liturgy, but recommendations on church-wide precautions that need to be taken and some guidelines on that?
I know that task force has received those questions. I'll let Frank's on this call if he wants to say, if there's things he can say about the types of things they're considering.
Right. We're already beginning to try to consider, do we need a safety committee, and what all do they need to be thinking about and putting in place for when the time comes that we do regather.
Yeah, Frank, do you want to offer some insight?
Sure. Everything is being framed within a framework of safety. And it'll be stepwise in terms of stage and what are the parameters that we will be looking at and everybody should be looking at before they move from one stage to the next and then perhaps have to move back. But everything is going to be safety first.
When might we expect to receive that document?
Well, we are in the midst of weekly meetings. Everything is evolving, as you can imagine, very quickly. Directives are coming. As we are working, that people in the national church are working along these lines as well. And so everything has to be integrated in that process. But current recommendations, of course, from Bishop Waldo are in effect at least until May 15. And everything is being viewed within, once again, the framework of safety first.
Alice, I also want to add that there's going to be some work, and part of what the bishop is working on right now is, the realization that everybody's space is different. And so there not only are going to be recommendations based on number of communicants, but also the size of your facility. And so I'm in the process right now of pulling that data for him as to how much space people have. And utilize that information with your decision making.
Suze, you had a hand up. Yeah.
So we have our own task force that is looking at some of these considerations, and we've been gathering resources that other churches and church groups have been working on. The best one that I've seen is the Wisconsin Council of Churches has prepared a document that we are going to use in sort of looking at our own guidelines. And of course, we'll follow the directives and the suggestions of the task force, the diocesan task force. But we've been working on this for a couple of weeks and just trying to find the best practices. And so there are other groups that are looking at that. And we're finding those very helpful as we're thinking about generally what are the considerations that we need to keep in mind as we're planning for when and how to reopen when the time comes.
Yeah, a thing, I was on a call yesterday and something struck me that someone said is, when we start to regather in whatever form, who are the first people that are going to line up to be there? And in the Episcopal Church, it's going to be people in high-risk populations. They're the people that are at church every Sunday. They're the people that do everything. And so how do we as faith leaders walk with them through the reality that that maybe can't happen? I don't know. And so following the guidance from our task force, there's coming today a pastoral letter from Bishop Curry, where he's outlining some of the theological perspective around what's it like to be a dispersed church, all these things. And a quote that'll be in there that I love is, "Inspire all, but imperil none." Mm-hmm. So the idea that if our worship puts anyone at risk for this, then that's something we have to consider. And the stats, CPG has the stats on who our parishioners are, and it's something like 2/3 of Episcopalians fall in those high-risk categories, and that's something we have to wrestle with.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I know it was funny because I was just talking to Andrew about this. There is a slew of resources that are coming out, and he was talking about that. Every time I just shared with him, it was very similar to the work that I did with the PPP loan. Every time I felt like I had it set to go, you got another piece of information. I think the thing to keep in mind is that all of these resources that you're seeing out there, they're all based on the same data from CDC, best practices. So the elements are the same. It's going to be shaped by whatever is mandated in a particular state and what is guidance given from a particular denomination. And so I think at the end of the day, it's all going to look vanilla with different toppings, so to speak.
What else? Questions folks have, things you're bumping up against, things that you found helpful. I've heard from some of our smaller congregations that don't have the technological capability or don't have, for whatever reason, that they're not doing anything communally. That's the wrong term. They're not doing anything all together at the same time, Zoom, phone call, whatever, but rather they're sending out kind of a bulletin to folks so that on Sunday morning people can have the readings, the little lectionary sheet. They can have the prayers to pray, because for some people, even a phone call is too much. And so they'll open up a piece of mail and they'll have things to help equip them for worship. Are there ways that y'all are helping folks worship on their own that people are responding to? Yeah, Todd.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that about sending out the bulletin, because that's been our framework, is that our, of course, both our priests are in technically the high risk category. So, and of course they rotate each week. So what they do is that one of them will send it, will send their sermon. The other one will send both the readings and the sermon, which when I was doing pure morning prayer, it was kind of problematic trying to move everything around, but that's the reason I'm going to anti-communion. But is that when he posts, it makes it easier for me to cut and paste. But what they'll both do is that they'll include their sermons, and then I interpret their sermons. So that way online they're both getting the church service, and they're getting the the preaching part, but I'm the one who's interpreting the preaching. And of course, if you watch one of my videos, I'm not trying not to make this a shameless plug, but you'll see how I'll be like, this is what I'll be like, I, Father Edwards, or I, Father Kenyon, and then I will interject what, so that way everyone knows it's mine and not them. It's interesting, but it works. At least I haven't got any bad feedback so far.
Yeah. And so as you're, live streaming the worship, you'll essentially read the sermon just so people have it. Yeah. I mean, there's a history of that. There's a book of sermons in the Episcopal tradition that places that didn't have clergy in person would have prepared text that a lay leader could read. And it's a way for Father Kenyon and their words to
Father Lloyd,
yeah, to get out there to folks who don't have it the other way. Are there other resources y'all are providing to help folks more deeply engage in prayer, worship on their own terms? Yeah, Alice.
I took it to heart early on. This fast that is forced upon us from the sacraments of bread and wine, and to really focus on the Word and God's presence with us in it. And so the book came to mind that I'd read many years ago by Martin Smith, The Word is Very Near You. And it's a guide to praying with the scriptures. And so I'm offering that twice a week, once on Sunday mornings at 9, which I was never able to do because I was always too busy when I had to be at church. So now I can do it really easily. So we do that on Zoom on Sunday morning, and then again at noon on Wednesday, so that just offer that 2 different times. And St. Timothy's hasn't had any formation opportunities in a long time until we started doing Lectio Divina when I arrived. And so we're doing both Lectio Divina on Sundays at 11:15 after coffee hour, and doing the prayer book study together twice a week. So, and I'm getting good response, so I'm delighted. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, Janie.
I'm meeting with the Godly Play group. It won't be a Godly Play class, but pray for me. I'm Zooming with the Under 5 set on Sunday morning. I think it's going to be utter chaos. And I've asked them all to bring, the characters for the gospel this Sunday, and that their interpretation of what those are. And I'm really looking forward to that. I don't know if it'll work, but I'm delighted to have the chance to talk with them about the Word. So
that's awesome. That's something I was struck. So we have a formation call at 1. 2 weeks ago on the formation call, there was some discussion about incorporating youth and children in the worship more fully, right? Like, not how do we engage that? And there was talk about doing stuff with Zoom with the little kids. And I love that you're doing that. And, kids are doing it with their classes and they're getting the hang of it. And yeah, you're going to have them run around the house trying to show their cats on the Zoom call, but they're going to feel a part, and they're not going to feel a part. They will more fully be a part of what's going on in the life of the church by doing that. I think that's awesome.
One of the most enduring and endearing things from this past week's Zoom call with the church was that when Chip Mays was playing, there were a couple of little bitty children with their own guitars, and everybody was on mute, but they were just playing along. And I just thought that was the best thing ever.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. There were some folks after last week's call that we're going to look for ways to incorporate youth. And so I'm hopeful that we can have some reports back in that 1 o'clock call about ways that's happened. But seeing that's awesome. You might also run into like my 9-year-old who is on his classroom Zoom calls, and he starts demanding people mute themselves. Or if they have music in the background, he'll tell them they need to turn the music off. He's become kind of the Zoom warden, as my wife and I have termed it. So you might have kids that really understand this. Suze, you had your hand up a minute ago, or?
I was just going to say this may bleed over a little into formation, but I had started out the year sharing spiritual practices that we might undertake as a parish. And what we were doing is introducing it in adult formation one Sunday each month, and for the 2 months that we were able to meet. And then there would be a written description and sort of prompts for each spiritual practice. And I've just continued sending that out in the newsletter. And people are appreciating that there is something that they can just sort of take a moment to do. This month's spiritual practice, or the one for May, is breath prayer. And last month was the examine. And the response to that has been pretty good. So just sort of sharing those little moments where people can be connecting with God seems to be a helpful thing.
Yeah, I've had some conversations with folks, both just clergy, but also parishioners, who've said that they've learned more and experienced more with the Book of Common Prayer in this time, and that's been helpful, and that any teaching that's been provided about this guide to prayer that we have has been helpful. And other tools, right? Spiritual practices, they're tools to help us engage with God. So any of that we can help provide, I think is great. We're coming up on our time. Any last thoughts, ideas? Yeah, Todd.
What would be a good free, in case when I decide that I do want to eventually get off the live and start pre-taping, so that way I don't have glitches, what's a good free program I could use to record and disseminate?
So you can, if you're using a modern cell phone, an iPhone or an Android, you can use that as the video. And then if you're on an iPhone, there's a program on the phone itself that you can download called iMovie that I believe is free if you're using an iPhone. And then once you have
Android.
Oh, you have Android. There's a similar, Google has a similar video thing. I don't know what that is, but if you email me, we can talk through this separately. But then once you have the video, you can upload it to Facebook or YouTube directly. You can set it as a premiere, that's the term that you want to look for when you're uploading. And all of that won't cost anything. And then if you want to splice in other videos and things, that can get a little trickier depending on the software you're using. But again, reach out to me separately and we can talk through that.
And your email address would be on the Diocesan website?
Yeah, it's abentrup, ABENTRUP @EDUSC.org.
Okay, I'll look for that.
Awesome. Any other thoughts, questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for your time. Thank you for the good work y'all are doing. It's been inspiring to see how congregations, I mentioned yesterday on our canon staff call, we were checking in, and I said one of the things that's pulling at me is this makes me miss parish ministry. Seeing how y'all are connecting with your congregations has been inspiring and really wonderful for me to witness and to help support any way that we can. So thank y'all. And if you're going to be on the calls this afternoon, 1 o'clock is formation, 2 o'clock is pastoral care. We'll see you then. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.